Georgia's famous Guidestones no longer standing tonight after the GBI says a group of people tried to blow them up. The blast damaged part of the structure, and within the last hour, crews tore down what was remaining. And up until today, the Guidestones had sat for decades near Elberton. This is close to the South Carolina state line. Now the GBI is trying to figure out who set off those explosives. 11 Alive's Don White was there earlier this evening.
Several of those structures were standing until just about an hour ago. That's when we looked out the window and we saw that backhoe down there pushing them down. All that remains is that pile of mangled stone. Police tape lines this field in rural eastern Georgia surrounding the Georgia Guidestones. The structure reduced to this rubble on the ground. Investigators say unknown individuals detonated an explosive device around 4 this morning. People who live nearby say they could hear and feel it miles away.
Ooh, if they'll do something like that, whoever done it will do something different. I mean, I hope they catch whoever done it, to be honest with you. Because people like that don't need to be on the street.
We've seen a video circulating on social media claiming that a lightning strike caused all of this. I reached out to the GBI and they said at this point they cannot confirm that. In Elberton, I'm Dawn White, 11 Alive News.
Hey guys and gals, it's your buddy Drew with Living History's Mysteries and Ferocious Feline Productions. We have a mystery, and you know how much I love a good mystery. Back in 1979, a man going by the name R.C. Christian commissioned a granite company down in Georgia to put up a monument on a small piece of acreage he had purchased outside of town. There was a lot of mystery, a lot of folklore, a lot of conspiracy around this monument. People didn't understand exactly what it was saying. They could read the languages, but the message behind it remained a mystery until July 6th, 2 years ago, when a mysterious individual or individuals managed to get past security cameras that surrounded the monument and set an explosive that devastated one of the tablets. The mystery is not only what the monument was, but why the town decided that with no formal complete investigation, they were going to bulldoze and dispose of the rest of that monument. But I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it. I'm going to let you check it out. We'll talk afterwards. This is good.
The Mysterious Georgia Guidestones, built in 1980 and oddly placed in seemingly one of the most random places you could think of. If you have never heard of the Georgia Guidestones, then keep watching because you are probably going to want to at least be aware of some of the strange and alarming things actually written on them. So I've known about the Georgia Guidestones for a while now, but I finally took the time to go there in person and see them for myself. So we flew to Atlanta and then drove 120 miles east of the city into the small town of Elberton, Georgia. And as you can see, this place is literally in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by cow pastures and farmland. So now we are here at the Georgia Guidestones. It's very hot outside and we are in the middle of nowhere. But I didn't go all the way out there to look at some glorified pebbles. What makes these stones so bizarre is the history of how they came to be and what exactly is engraved in them. So roughly 40 years ago, a man going by the name of R.C. Christian commissioned the Elberton Granite Finishing Company to build these stones on behalf of a small group of loyal Americans who seek the age of reason. He then described how he wanted the stones to be built and that they would serve as a clock, a compass, a calendar, and also that they needed to be capable of withstanding catastrophic events. As alarming as the instructions were, the granite company still did what R.C. asked and built the Georgia Guidestones as he commissioned them to. The stones were apparently very expensive considering hundreds of thousands of pounds of granite were used, but it was no issue for Mr. R.C. since this project was being richly sponsored by these loyal Americans. Now, what do these stones actually look like today, and how do they act as a clock and a compass like R.C. described? Well, similar to other ancient sites around the world, the Georgia Guidestones have parts of the granite chipped out to specifically align with certain astronomical events and timelines, such as a channel through the stone indicating the celestial pole, horizontal slots displaying the travel of the sun, and a sunbeam through the capstone that marks noontime throughout the year. As weird and as seemingly unnecessary as that is, the most unsettling thing is what was actually engraved in the stones. Written on the face of each stone tablet are 10 guidelines, almost like a counterfeit of the 10 Commandments, only with its own completely different agenda. So let's read through the list real quick, and I'm going to start with number 10 and lead up to number 1. So number 10, be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature, leave room for nature. Not sure why they said that twice. Number 9, prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite, whatever the infinite is. Number 8, balance personal rights with social duties. Number 7, avoid petty laws and useless officials. I can see where they're coming from. Number 6, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court, which sounds similar to the United Nations. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. That honestly sounds great. I can agree with that. Number 4, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. That's where you get into some gray areas because what is reasonable to some may not be reasonable to others. Number 3, unite humanity with a living new language. Sounds like a one world language agenda. Number 2, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. And last but certainly not least, we have number 1 to tie it all together. Number 1, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. This guideline in particular raises major red flags because there are almost 8 billion with a B people on the earth, which means that in order for this to be accomplished, roughly 94% of the world's population would need to be wiped out. So you can probably see why this rule is so controversial. Another odd thing is that these 10 guidelines are translated into 8 major world languages: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. And on top of the structure, a message is written in 4 ancient languages: Babylonian, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. And the message says, "Let these be guide stones to an age of reason. So since these were built and opened in 1980, people from all over the world have come to see them in person, and these have been a prime site for conspiracy theories, as you would imagine. Who is R.C. Christian? Who are these supposed loyal Americans that sponsored the project? And most importantly, why? Why build these stones in the first place, and why here of all places? Although there are many theories as to why they were actually built, when you read the 10 rules, it honestly sounds like the basic guidelines to rebuild a devastated civilization. Why else would RC specifically request that the stones be capable of withstanding catastrophic events? It sounds like this group of people, whoever they are craving a new kind of control over the human population. But there are simply too many people for centralized man-made control. So in order to have the kind of control they are vying for, the population must be reduced significantly, hence rule number 1. One thing we should notice though is that rule number 1 doesn't say reduce humanity to 500 million. It says maintain humanity under 500 million, as if the reduction would have already taken place prior to this guideline having to be enforced. And yet another very odd thing you should know is there is another tablet separate from the main structure that mentions a time capsule placed 6 feet below the site. The only thing is, there's no date. It leaves the day the time capsule was supposedly buried and the day it is supposed to be opened blank. Maybe because it's not supposed to be buried or opened on a specific date, but rather a specific event, whenever that event may take place. And another thing you should take note of is that the Georgia Guidestones were built during the height of the Cold War, when everyone thought that World War III was imminent, which would have been the perfect opportunity for them to rebuild a devastated civilization and reshape society from scratch according to their own liking had World War III actually happened. But thank the Lord, World War III did not end up happening, because we would probably be living on a very different planet right now. So it honestly sounds like these individuals are either planning something or are aware of something unknown to the masses, and this is their own special way of subtly yet publicly warning the public of this new world order of theirs and what they want it to look like. And when you look at how aggressively and even desperately modern day governments are vying for more and more control, all for the sake of peace and security, this new world order is looking less like conspiracy theory and more like conspiracy fact. So now, with all that being said, if you didn't know about the Georgia Guidestones, now you know. Just know that I didn't make this video to scare you, but simply to remind you that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. Basically what I'm saying is, don't allow yourself to be distracted by insignificant political divisions, petty offenses, and things that you think are the enemy, but rather are just things distracting you from the true enemy. There is a greater enemy at work in the shadows, and people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. So it is up to us to know the truth, to be aware of the enemy's schemes, and to be the light and the salt of the world, to preserve the earth, to shine a light in the darkness, and to resist the enemy so that he may flee. And remember that the wheat and the chaff are growing together. So if you see an increase in wickedness, just know that there will be an increase in righteousness to counteract it. I hope you have a blessed life, and I hope to see you again soon back in the sanctum. Thanks for watching.
welcome back. You know, it's like I was saying in the beginning, there's a lot of mystery surrounding the Georgia Guidestones. Who was R.C. Christian? Who was he really? People looked for decades and could find no one by that name that fit his description. Who was this group of mysterious individuals that financed the land and the monument? Who was this mysterious individual who managed to sneak onto that land? Who managed to drive onto that land? Get past all the security cameras, plant the explosive, and attempt to blow up this monument that had sat in that location since 1980. And the final mystery, why just a few hours after the explosion, with no time to do it in a formal investigation, check for tire tracks, footprints, anything, did the city decide to bulldoze and completely do away with any possible evidence left over on the standing parts of that monument? Was it a conspiracy? Was it a group of individuals preparing for a new world order? Sadly, until somebody brags about it, comes forward, tells their dog, the mystery behind the Georgia Guidestones and the bombing and destruction of the stones will just remain one of those mysteries that history left behind. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. God bless you. God love you. We do. And we'll see you out there.